There you go. Okay. All right. Welcome to the August 7th edition of the study hall. What we're going to do is pick up a theme that we had we last did this in the middle of May, somewhere around there, so about 3 months ago. And the basic deal is that reading the passages from different points of view is crucial in these things, because if you're presented with this giant wall of text, then there's really no way for you to understand what to prioritize and what not to prioritize out of that giant wall of text, unless you know who you are reading it as. Because, I mean, in the world, this is not something, out there in the real world, you don't really have to try too hard to do this, because you will have a perspective on something. But just as a sense of how important it is to personalize stuff, like let's say that you were reading some brief about the way, just about the way certain court cases were tried in some country. And imagine reading that article 3 times, from the point of view of the actual defendant, from the point of view of the prosecutor, and from the point of view of the lawyer for the defendant. I mean, that would be, just think how differently you would read absolutely everything in those articles. It would be everything. The way you read every word of it would be affected by who you were and why you were reading it. So, and as far as the basic protocol that you should follow here, if you watch some of the earlier study hall sessions that have this same theme, we've elucidated this before, so just a little review of that. When you notice that you're dealing with this kind of passage, when you notice that it's possible to personalize a passage, in other words, when you notice that a passage involves people or things made up of people, such as businesses. One thing that is, I hesitate to call it best practice, because for different people, there's always different things that work best. And you should always try things out and see if they work for you. But when you notice that you're dealing with this kind of thing, what you should first do is quickly browse the passage. There's no sense in reading it in real depth the first time, because you don't really know what perspective to read it from. And so there's not really going to be a way to efficiently segregate details into things that are important and things that are not. So that's kind of the point, right? You don't want to, and when people waste a lot of time on these passages, that's normally the reason why they waste so much time, because they don't take a perspective on it, and so they feel as though every single last detail in the passage is so important. But if you know whose point of view is the one to take, then you'll realize more quickly that certain things matter more than others. So the point of quickly browsing the passage is to do two things. Notice the goal of the passage, or what is the issue being tested. And then just reflect on that a little bit. Reflect on what the goal is that you're trying to achieve or address, or what the issue is that's being treated. And based on that goal or issue, or from that goal or issue, figure out whose point of view is most important to resolving the problem. Once you've figured out that point of view, then that's when you go spend the time. So go back and read slowly from that point of view. I mean, some people will object to this whole type of thing, and they'll say, you know what, it looks like I'm reading this twice. That's going to take me twice as long. But it's not going to, because again, once you understand whose point of view you're reading from, you will get through these things much, much, much faster because there's going to be a lot of things that you can ignore. Like if you are a company's finance officer, you have the dollars and cents person, and you read some passage that's talking about, the company is polluting the environment in these ways, which invoke such and such sanctions from the government. If you're a finance person, all you care about out of the whole thing is sanctions that cost you money. Like you don't even care what's happening to the environment, nor do you care what the pollutants are, because you're the finance person. But then if you're the environmental compliance person, then it's a totally different thing. You don't care about dollars and cents, but you do care about what you're emitting into the environment. So you'll know what is not important and what is, and this should be, even though you're basically reading it twice, you'll find that this will actually be faster because you will have a distinct focus. And the focus includes what not to focus on, which is a super important thing too. So let's try to put this to work. Try your hand at this one. And I'll give you, remember where the multiple choice answers are found. That's in the same place as always. But just in case any of you are new to this whole thing, this is where you find the multiple choice answers. And I'll give you a timer. Go for it. All right, let's pick something pretty soon. Remember the way this test works. If you're new to this, if you are, there's always a couple people here who are relatively inexperienced with this exam. The way the test works is that you have to pick an answer to everything all the time, or you just simply are not allowed to move on to the next item. So you got to pick one of the A3s. Again, since you're not actually standing in front of me, there's only so much I can do to enforce that, as it were. But just make sure that you're picking answers just for your own sake of getting used to the way how the test works. So let's talk about this. So quick browse. We've got blah, 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 and then they're talking about Aptron's product is likely to dominate the market. So this is the goal, or if you prefer, the issue. We want to show why a product is going to dominate the market. So what does that actually mean? What does dominate the market? Whose point of view matters when you're talking about will a product dominate the market? What does that mean? Yeah, dominate the market means it's going to sell more than the other person's stuff is going to sell. So, you might need a couple layers of interpretation here, too. Peeling back the first layer of this, you're just literally translating that into easier words. In other words, you might want two steps where if you've watched enough of these things, you're definitely going to be sick of hearing me say this. But the first thing is explain it to a 10-year-old. Because the problem here is, the main problem all stems from the fact that it's presented in such formal-sounding language, which to our human brains that are very human, it doesn't mean a whole lot. So the first thing you want to do is get it down into language that human beings are much more likely to understand. So dominate the market, such abstract terms. A 10-year-old would have no idea what that meant. But you can just explain that as, whose product will sell more? Sure. Okay, then once you've got it in those terms, decide whose perspective is most central. Well, we're talking about whether something is going to sell. So ultimately, whether something will sell is not up to the seller. Like the only times when that's true would be if you had some like centrally planned old Soviet type of economy where the supplier just told everybody what they were going to buy and that was that. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about a capitalist free market here, which means that the buyer is ultimately the person who decides. So read as the buyer because that's going to be who ultimately makes the decision. So, all right. So now you go back and you read this as the buyer. So for the past several years, blah, 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 as the buyer, I just know that's the old way of doing things. I honestly don't really care because this is not the thing I'm going to be buying. This is the thing that already exists and has been around and is presumably obsolete. So the amount of time that I'm going to spend reading that first sentence, even in this step where I go back and read more carefully, I'm going to spend very little time, like 2 seconds, because for the past several years, I just kind of don't care. Recently, there are two competing companies. They've both developed separate systems that both do the same thing, so also I still don't care. Because I'm trying to figure out a difference between these things. Again, as the buyer, this comes naturally to me. I don't really have to think about it. You know, if I look at two things that are the same between these products, I mean, they might be wonderful, amazing, awesome things, but if they're the same, it's not going to help me make a decision between them because it's the same. So I still don't really have to spend more than a couple of seconds reading that second sentence either. So, I mean, you have A and G have new product out. New systems out. They work in pretty much the same way as far as color coding this correspondence. This is all I really need to get out of this sentence. And actually that's all I need to get out of this sentence too. The systems are similarly priced and are equally easy to use. Notice, I mean, most of you guys got this problem correct, but what I want you to notice is the efficiency factor here, because you probably could have solved this problem in well under 1 minute with the right kind of focus. And some of you took a lot longer than that. Because basically all of the words from here to here simply do not matter at all. They don't make any difference because of the issue. The issue is you are trying to distinguish between them and decide which one is going to be a better seller. If you're the person who's going to be purchasing these systems for your company, you know that. You know that you are only looking for differentiation points. The entire green paragraph consists of stuff that is all exactly the same, so you just don't care and you don't even have to really pay attention to it. Fast. That's the promise that I made you guys. Reading twice can be faster than reading once. Because if you didn't do it this way, if you just read this thing straight through the first time, then you would actually have to read the green stuff because you wouldn't know that it was unimportant. It would look as though it were just as important as everything else. And it isn't. So basically I come away from that passage with nothing in the passage at all is going to, well, differentiate between these companies. So I'm left with the answer choices that have to do that. And what's nice about this is that they don't really even have to tie back to the passage. Because if there were differences mentioned here, then it might be a different sort of deal, because then I might have to correlate things. Like if I said something like, if the passage said something like Aptron's system requires more processor speed than gamma text system does. Then an answer choice like, okay, our company likes to economize on processor speed and buy like the lowest processor speed available. Then you'd have to correlate that back to what was here to figure out advantage, disadvantage. Here you're not even going to have to do that because there's nothing here that could even correlate to a difference. So straight up, the question is going to be, what's the specific question? Remember, always translate the question into specifics. So here that means what makes Aptron's product better? Yeah, Anjal says, Anjal. Why should I go for Aptron? Exactly. That's supposed to be a question mark if I knew how to type. Okay. So that's the question. Just make sure you keep your eyes focused on this question. And if you are the person who purchases software suites for your company, of course you're going to stay focused on this. So you almost can't be distracted. This is kind of weak because it's not about products in the first place. And it's also, if it really favored anybody, it would favor the wrong guys. It would favor G. But, so that's two kinds of flaws there. Weak connection favors the wrong side anyway. By the way, just so you know, the thing that's cool about these problems, like they would not write an answer choice like A that favored Aptron. In other words, they don't have things that like kind of go in the direction that you want, but don't totally. No subtlety. Like the answer choices that they give you will either be totally right or totally wrong, and it's actually really nice of them, but there's not really anything in between. So, in other words, if you think you're dealing with some subtle difference where you've got a wrong answer that's close to being right, it means you haven't personalized it or interpreted it correctly, one of those two things. And I mean, you can actually use that as a hallmark for whether you have reviewed these problems enough. If you're asking yourself, have I reviewed this critical reasoning problem enough, question mark. The simplest standard I can give you for answering that question is if every wrong answer is very obviously wrong to you. No subtleties and nothing seems close. I'll fix the typo in a second. Then, yes, you have reviewed the problem enough. If any answer choice seems as though it's like really close to being correct, then you have not reviewed the problem enough. And I mean, a lot of people don't like this fact or don't really want to believe it because they want to believe that there are answer choices that are like subtle. Because that's not what the problem is. The problem is not shades of subtlety in the answer choices. The problem is that you are being presented with a giant wall of text, and you have to like make that real in your head. You have to make it not a bunch of black letters on a white page. Once you successfully do that, there are no subtleties at all. It's pretty neat. Choice B doesn't even sort of try to distinguish between the two companies. In fact, it doesn't even talk about the companies. It's as a lunch. C is also clearly in favor of the wrong side. D says what they both do. It's not a differentiation point. And E is in favor of A. So this favors the correct side, favors your side, which is the A side. You want to buy A. And this is what I mean by sufficient review. I think most of you guys didn't seem to find this problem terribly hard or whatnot, but when you review this problem, just make sure that these really are absolutely black or absolutely white. I'm looking for a choice that favors A. Favors G, sort of. Doesn't even go there. Favors G, doesn't even go there. Favors A. Like, notice these are not shades of subtlety. This is like yes or definitely no. Any questions about this problem, feel free to type in the chat box. If not, we'll do another one. Let's do one that, let's see. How about this one? This is one of those problems that of the people who've seen it on the forum, everybody who sees this problem on the forum loves it, if you know what I mean. It attracts a lot of attention from forum posters. People like to talk about it. A lot of people find it challenging. I'll give it a shot. So you'll see it. It's the Hollywood restaurant problem. You should see it on the board. Here is, remember, don't forget the answer choices. They are located here underneath your name. Give it a shot. I'm going to bump the time by a little bit and give you a little bit more of it. You'll notice that there's a lot of translating to do here. I mean, what I mean by translating is you've got a lot of stuff that your hypothetical 10-year-old would not really follow. Like this question to a hypothetical 10-year-old would be absolute garbage. You'd also want to make profits into something more concrete. And, anything in these choices that is not so concrete, you'd want to make that concrete as well. So there's a lot of translating to do, but just make sure that your 10-year-old can follow it. Okay, let's pick something that is a thing. There are still about 4 or 5 of you who haven't answered the question, so go ahead and give me some sort of answer on the question. All right, let's talk about it. Okay. So we have a lot of translating to do here. But before we do that, again, let's do the whole browsing thing. Let's quickly browse the text and see what in the world we're even arguing about in the first place. See, because that's the other reason why these passages tend to be hard for people, is that this is not how anybody takes on topics like this on planet Earth. People don't go into an entire explication of something before they know what they're talking about. That's not how life works. like the way that life works is you have a conversation about some issue and then you develop that issue while fully aware of what the issue is. So that's the other reason why this way that we've talked about viewing this is better. Because it's more like the way you think in real life. You don't absorb a bunch of completely context-free information and then have an issue thrown at you. That's not how it works. Like you have an issue and you collect information around it. So the issue is ultimately this: the profits of a restaurant. So now there's a couple things that we want to talk about with that. Because let's think about perspective. I mean, again, ultimately this is a consumer-centered thing. I mean, profits are going to be down to who goes to the restaurant and spends money there. So the point of view is very clearly going to be, again, the optimal point of view to read from. POV stands for point of view. That's going to be the point of view of customers, or at least the clientele of the restaurant, the people who eat there. Or if they eat or not eat, the people who go there and spend money. But now we need to think, because remember, this is not just like the last problem you were just talking about buying a fixed system where it was kind of 1 or 0, lights on or lights off. You either bought the system or you didn't buy the system. This is a little bit different because restaurants are a place where clients go for varying lengths of time and also spend varying lengths of money, varying amounts of money. So someone tell me, because this is where it really, this is where you make or break it. What does this mean in concrete terms? Like 10-year-old is asking you, what does that mean, more profit at a restaurant? How does a restaurant make more profit? Be as specific as you can. But how does that, remember from the client's point of view, like if the client does what, then the restaurant will make the most money. You're going to spend more, but also what else? You're going to leave. You're going to spend a lot of money and or you're going to turn around and leave. Because that's both, those are both relevant. If you're talking about a fixed capacity restaurant, you know, and if this is a place with celebrities prancing around everywhere, then presumably it's going to be filled. So what this means in specific terms that a 10-year-old could perfectly well understand is spend more on the bill and or not stay as long, stay for less time. That's what the argument says. The next step is to figure out what the heck this means. Those are some crazy words. And by the way, if you have to read this part lots of times, that's totally fine. I mean, I do too. I have to read this shamefully large number of times. But, I mean, if anything, just kind of build it backwards. I mean, it gives reason to believe that it's likely that it's kind of garbage words. It is. You think that. So the words that count here are vulnerable to criticism. Because, I mean, these other words, there's an amazingly large number of these words in this problem, but the rest of the words there are kind of just, they're words that don't change the direction of your thinking. You know, believe that it is likely that is kind of just like saying yes to something. And then it gives reason to believe that it is likely that is still kind of, it says yes to something. And on the grounds that it gives reason to. I mean, wow, so many words, but still, those words don't. The words with the brown underline don't shape or change the way that you think about anything, but the purple ones do. So you want to show, what does this mean to a 10-year-old? You want to show let's stay concrete with this. The argument says that customers would spend more and or stay for less time. It means that these green things would be wrong, right? So that means that you're going to be saying that one or the other of those is foolish. So you want to show that under the circumstances described, the circumstances described are, well, we haven't even read them too much yet, but people would either not spend more and or stay longer. This is the goal. I mean, notice that this work is all done totally up front. I mean, we have not even read the content of the passage yet, which surprises a lot of people. But if we go back to this opening screen, I mean, we are only right there. I mean, we haven't even done the real reading of the passage yet, and yet we already have a super specific focus here. And I mean, I think this is the reason why people don't get this problem right a lot of the time, because they don't do anything up front. They just like la la la, read the words. That's not how this works. I mean, you have to really know why you are reading these words. So you want to show that clients are going to spend less money and or that they will just hang out. All right, now let's read the passage. We got normal tables. The plan is to put in tall tables. So, plan is to put in tall tables with stools to replace normal tables. So they say, these guys who you want to prove are wrong, I mean, in isolation, this sounds reasonable, because I mean, tall tables are really not fun for the most part. I mean, that's why people don't stay in bar areas of restaurants for a terribly long time. So they say tall tables kind of suck, so people will get out of there faster. Hence, more profits. I mean, that's not a totally stupid argument. But what are they? So now, wait a minute. What are they totally not thinking about here? Like, what makes this restaurant? Because I mean, right now, the way they argue this could apply to absolutely any restaurant at all that gets a decent flow of clients. Like there's a super special thing about this particular restaurant that these people are cheerfully ignoring. What is that? What makes this restaurant different? But people aren't gonna think that tall tables are suddenly, in general, tall tables. I mean, the tables are not gonna suddenly appeal to people. But what? I like where you're going with that. Why? Why not? Pete, give me the second half of that. If you spend more time, okay, but why would you spend more time? No. I mean, I think you guys are all kind of getting indirectly at this. But no one has said it yet. Like, what makes this restaurant more awesome than other restaurants? Jessica says it. Yeah, it's the fact that there are, like, movie stars traipsing around. I mean, that's the point. And I mean, again, when you read this as a client of this restaurant, this is why you got to read from the right point of view, because otherwise it's just a mess of garbage words. But if you're a client, you will immediately understand that this is one of those see and be seen kind of restaurants where you don't really go for the food, you kind of just go so that you can watch movie stars and see what they're wearing or whatever. and take paparazzi photos. I mean, it should be kind of obvious when you read this, because that's the deal. I mean, that's the only really distinguishing feature of this restaurant. Which you should also be asking yourself. You'd be saying, what's special about this place? Well, I mean, that's kind of the only thing that is. And so, therefore, when you read this, that should come to mind. And like, if you're, some paparazzo who haunts this place, then you're going to think about that. You're going to be like, dude, wait a minute. You're not thinking about, I mean, what you say, whoa, wait a minute. You're not thinking about the single thing that makes this place special, which is the fact that celebrities are hanging out there. So, and that's why does that matter? It's what Nazanin says it. Because you're not going to just eat your food and get the heck out of there. I mean, you're not going to want to do that. And if you're sitting at a taller table, you're especially not going to want to do that, because you'll have a better view. You're going to take better pictures. So that's basically what the deal is. I mean, the passage writer or speaker or whatever, whoever it is, doesn't think about the fact that they don't think about this. Like, in normal restaurants, the tall table means discomfort, which means out of there. But here, it's not what it means. It means tall table, which means excellent vantage point for celebrity watching. And so you're going to stay way longer. That's the point. So this is kind of what we're looking for here. So some celebrities choose to sit at the tall tables. That's not random clients will do this or do that. I mean, in fact, if anything, celebrities will probably dump a lot more money because they're celebrities. But A doesn't do either of the two things that we're talking about. B, the price of meals compensates. So, I mean, this is actually a direct strike against what we want to do. I mean, we're trying. We want to show that the profits will not increase, and they're saying that they will at least make up for it, if not increase. C doesn't immediately mean anything to a 10-year-old, so we need to translate that. I mean, what is the generalization about lingering? What is that? What is the generalization? Actually, generalizations are not examples. So that's actually the whole point of generalizations, is that they are not examples. It is... I'm not asking you guys for a definition of the word generalization. I'm asking you, what is the generalization made here? Yeah, the generalization is this. I mean, this is what they're saying is normally true. So, where they make that typical, the word typically is what shows you that that's a generalization. The point is that it's not an example. In fact, the only example here is a counterexample. But that's the generalization. The generalization is that people who sit at tall tables usually get the heck out of there faster. That's the generalization. So this is the choice we want, because once you explain this to your hypothetical 10-year-old who is always hanging out with you during critical reasoning, it'll be clear. Like, this exception to this means that they will not actually get out of there faster, which is the point. There you go. D says a restaurant, D says that less time offsets more money. So that means that you've got one pro, one con. You don't know how that's going to turn out. And then, because less time but less money. So less money is what you want to prove, but less time is the opposite. You don't know who's going to win that tug of war. And then E says that with enough tall tables, you would not see the celebrities. So that would not accomplish these things. If you could not see the celebrities, then you would not stay longer. You would get the heck out of there. And then these guys would probably be right. So I wouldn't say that D is an irrelevant comparison. Because if I mean, the red flag of D is that it doesn't really touch on the things that are special about this restaurant. But if you did have something, I mean, it would be a little bit crazy talk. But if you had something like, oh, people who, leave faster usually pay more money. I mean, there's no way that's going to be true in the real world. But if it were true, then, that might actually help you here. But it still wouldn't show you about the Hollywood and putting in tables to watch celebrities. So, in any case, again, people do love this problem very dearly, but just think about what makes this problem hard. There are a few things that I can think of. The first is that the most important in my book is that there's a lot more decoding of stuff that you have to do before you can even read the passage. Like, first of all, profits is not, you got to take a little bit more time to think about what profits imply here. Because for the most part, profits in these passages is like, you sell one item to a customer or you don't. But here it's not. Here it's a restaurant where profit is a function of two things instead of one. So that's a thing. And then you need to decode this horrible garbage question part. Luckily, you can ignore 2/3 of it and just concentrate on the vulnerable to criticism part. But you still have to figure out that you can do that. Then you got to flip around the interpretation you made of the profit part, make that the opposite. And only after you've done all of that do you read this passage from the point of view of the client. And then you think, okay, I get it. I totally get it now. Because the fact that there are celebrities makes all the difference. But notice how much work there is to do up front. There's a lot. And there's a lot of translating for your hypothetical 10-year-old. And also notice that this problem would be a lot easier if I gave you the same problem in easy words. Like if instead of saying this, if I said, oh, they would get the heck out of there faster, and so they would make more money. And then instead of these horrible words, if I said, why would that be wrong? And if instead of this I said, well, they actually won't get out of there faster, then this would be this problem wouldn't be very hard at all. So, is the passage saying that lingering? Well, I mean, it's a restaurant. I mean, remember that all of these problems do invoke some degree of man or woman on the street type of common sense. Like if someone hangs out in a restaurant, they don't continue to order food at the same rate that a new client would. So, I mean, they don't have to spell that out for you. Like if you understand how people roll when they go to restaurants, then you'll know that. I mean, if one group spends twice as long as a normal group takes, that means the restaurant will make less money off of that table. So, answer choice D is that the less time, in translated into simple terms, is the less time people spend. The less time people are there, the less money they spend on the check. which means that those are like paralleling each other. Then in that case, it doesn't matter because lingering would not affect profit one way or the other. Is it asking for what it's asking for the criticism. Yeah, you can criticize this because you could very reasonably think what. So they're asking you for what, how could you criticize? Because they make you believe something. I mean, it's not going to be something that's written there because they're not going to criticize their own argument. So, I mean, when you're looking for, well, yes and no. I mean, you need to point out something that is problematic about the original argument. It's not going to be something they said because they are not going to poke holes in their own case. But it's the thought that you would have when I say these things to you. Like if you're like, you know what? If I just told you these things in normal spoken language, it's basically what would your reaction be? Like, you know what, this is a place where people come to hang out and take pictures of celebrities. But you know what, we put really tall tables there. They would just all leave really fast. To which you would tell me, no, they wouldn't, dude. They would stay. I'd stay. That's the point. It's your reaction that I would evoke by saying such a silly thing. Can I explain what RAH? What are you asking me in particular? And then let's try to move on to another one pretty soon. But let's see what the question is here. The generalization is the yellow part. It's that part which translates into simpler terms as that part. That's the part that's wrong because there are movie stars hanging around. Alrighty, still, let's see if it. That less than what? You would see that's the kind of answer that they're not gonna give you. If you were, I don't remember if you were here yet for the first problem that we did, but one promise that I made you, and it is an ironclad promise indeed, is that you will not have answers that are sort of correct, but have like big issues. You're going to have answers that are either, whoa, that's totally the right answer, or answers that are not right at all. The problem with saying what you have there for D is if you know that people spend less, the problem is the argument is still saying that they will also stay for not as long. And you haven't debunked that. So they're going to spend less, but they're also going to leave earlier according to the argument, and those would just kind of cancel each other out. So that would leave you with a very strong objection. So it would kind of maybe sort of help you, but that's not how the correct answers work here. The correct answers work here are unambiguous. Okay, I've actually answered that question about 4 times already, so it's the yellow thing. But if you didn't catch that, then go ahead and check out the recording, because we got to move on here. But all right, anything else that is not something people have asked already? I don't mean to be a jerk, but we've been talking about this problem for a long time. The generalization is the yellow stuff. It's also that yellow stuff. Okay. Let's move on to another question. Let's see here. How about that? All right. Give it a shot. Remember where answers are found. Let's pick a thing that is a thing. We still have about half of you guys haven't picked anything yet. So let's pick something. Okay, let's talk about this. Still have a bunch of non-answers. Remember, I can't force your hand, but the GMAT can. I mean, if you don't answer a problem, it's just going to be, the GMAT is very patient. The GMAT has the patience of a saint. If you don't answer the question, it's just going to chill. It's just going to sit there and look at you. Be like, why are you not acting, sir or man? Yeah, the words are hard to understand, which honestly, the words are hard to understand is kind of the reason why all of the ones that are challenging are challenging. It's because you can't immediately explain them to a 10-year-old. I mean, again, I'm sort of obsessed with proving this point to you guys, but the logic of the problems will never, ever, ever even sort of be an issue here. It's going to be the translating part. I mean, as far as I know you're kidding, but like the age of like 9, 10, 11 years old, that's not chosen. That's not a random number that I'm just throwing out there. It's that if you know anybody who's about that old, that's the age where kids are totally able to understand anything concrete that adults can understand, but just not abstractions. You know, like the whole notion of profit is still too much for a 10-year-old, but, you know, spend less and stay longer, they can totally understand those things. You know, market, dominating a market, they don't know what the heck that is, but, you know, sell more stuff to more people, oh, hey, that's perfectly okay to understand. I mean, 5 is a bit young for most of those things. So, I mean, at 5 years old and you can't really, like, touch it with your hands, they're not really going to understand it. So, but again, let's quick browse. Quick browse reveals, remember we're not spending a huge amount of time reading this thing yet. It's quick browse. The quick browse reveals that we are talking about how to improve future access to drugs. What the heck does that mean? That's the issue. So, I mean, whether you can solve this problem is going to depend on whether you can successfully interpret that. The issue is future access to drugs. What does access mean? Yeah, it means two things. It means that people can afford them, but on an even more fundamental level, it also means what? Like if you lowered the price of every drug to like 25 cents, that would probably not improve access, because why not? Like if the price went too low, then what would be the problem? Yeah, the problem would be availability, because I mean access means two things. It means the price has to not be crazy high, but it also means they have to sell it in the first place. So it has to be something that you can get. So, yeah. All right. Okay. So, access to drugs. Two things. That means cheap enough to buy, and will they even sell them at all? Okay, that's the issue. So, okay, now see who. I mean, usually when you're talking about markets and such, you're talking about the buyer, but this time we're talking about price setting and decisions of whether something will be sold. So the consumer doesn't make these decisions. Who makes these decisions? I mean, I don't decide as the buyer. I don't decide what will be offered and at what price. That's the one measure of control that who has. Yeah, someone in the company, whether it's someone in that business, probably maybe not the owner, but someone whose job is to do that sort of research and figure out how to set prices. Probably some sort of finance officer. Yeah, because that's what they do. They do the balance sheet. They try to maximize the profit. So, well, of course they want it, but that's not the point. I mean, if the question is, will there be access, that's not their decision. I mean, they would be very happy if there were access, but because again, when we say point of view is important, we're talking about important in the sense of determining how stuff will turn out, not important in the sense of passively being affected by stuff. Because I mean, otherwise you could flip that around on the other thing. Like when we talk about will this product sell, I mean, obviously the company cares because if they don't sell their product, then they won't stay in business. But that's not the point because they don't determine whether it will sell. The people who actually determine whether it will sell are the buyers. Here, this time, the people who determine at what price it will be offered and whether it will be offered at all, those decisions are made by the company that makes the drug. So, or maybe regulatory authorities if the government's gonna like cartel the prices or something, but they don't talk about that here. So that means it's the company. So read as the company, as the company officer who sets prices or decides what to sell and where. Okay. There, that's you. So someone says to you, that if we take patents away, then you may not be able to charge as much. Like you'll have to charge less because of market forces. But that's not an issue of access so much. At least that's your chagrin to hear that. But premium prices instead of affordable prices. But widely affordable, so more people will be able to afford them. More people will be able to. As far as which parts of this are coming from where, let me color code it, right? So this is red, this is red. You'll have to charge less comes from the fact that patented drugs, actually you can charge more. It's the same thing, we just said it the other way around. Okay. And so therefore, you'll have a market of more people to whom you can sell. A market. And you want to be, and remember that you need to stay focused here. I mean, if you make yourself, someone who's trying to crank up the company profits, then that might lead you off track. Because then you would just think, oh, greedy, haha, I don't care if more people can buy my drug, I just want more money. But that's not the point, because what we're talking about here is actually being able to sell it to the biggest variety of people. So you want to show that this is not true. Like you need to show what they are saying to you is this. I mean, if you really want to break it down to the simplest possible terms, they're saying if you take away the patent protection, then you'll be able to sell to more people. I mean, notice that the decreased price would hurt you, but that's not relevant right now because that's not an access issue. I mean, the only way that's relevant is that it actually lets more people buy the drug. Alrighty. That's what we want. So someone translate this for our 10-year-old. Does anyone want to try? Because, I mean, weakens the argument is right now sort of meaningless garbage if you're a fourth grader. So what does that mean? I mean, that's still, I mean, I'm in fourth grade, man. I don't know what an argument is. I mean, if you know an actual 10-year-old, just imagine how they would look at you if you said something like the argument, and especially if you tried to say contradict the logic set. I mean, a 10-year-old would think you were nuts. Like actual 10-year-old, actual fourth grader, not hypothetical fourth grader who thinks and talks like an adult, but like actually someone who is 10 years old. Yeah, that's more like it, right? I mean, why might I not be able to sell to more people? Like, you know, if you take away, my rights, the drug, which is what patents is, it's what patent does, I won't be able to sell to more people. Why not? I mean, you got to be able to get the question into these words. Raw, I don't know if that's raw or if that's initials. I don't know if that's RAH or raw, but you're kind of halfway there. You made the patents being abolished thing concrete. But what you don't have there is the issue that we need to focus on, which is the number of people to whom I can sell. You remember, you have to think in those terms. So that's the first half of it. If you do that, then why will this not happen? It's not any other. There's a lot of other aspects of patent protection. Because, I mean, think about how many directions you could go in with this. I mean, if you're not focused on this issue, for example, you could go in vastly different directions. Like, I don't know, if you take away patent protection, then I'm not going to want to do research anymore because other companies will just steal my final product and make tiny changes to it and, then call it theirs. So that would definitely be a serious problem because then nobody would want to do R&D anymore. But that's research and development is not the current topic. So, but yeah, people who are saying words like logic set and argument, don't do that. Like, make it a question that is in very simple terms. All right. This. A says that even if you take away my rights to the drug, I can still make money selling it. That definitely does not tell me this. That pretty much tells me the opposite of that. It tells me that I can keep selling it. Wrong way. Countries that don't do it are big, big, big countries. Well, I mean, if we have the rest of this, then think about what that means. I mean, a few of you picked this choice. But right now the argument is saying that you'll still be able to sell. And now if you add this into that mix, then you're going to be able to sell to, even bigger populations of people. So that's also exactly the wrong way. It's black when you want white. because you'll have way more people to whom to sell the drug. C says, what does C, what does that mean to a 10-year-old? There's a lot of words there. Someone translate that for me. And you can, it's not, you might be able to make, it's not going to keep you from manufacturing the drug, because you are going to still own this patent. It just says that the synthesis of it, like the process by which you cook it up in your lab, is what would be patented instead of the actual drug. Yeah, that's RAH raw. That's perfect summary of it. In fact, that's such a great summary of it that I'm just going to copy and paste it onto the board. That's very well done. Yeah, that's what it means. And so think about what the consequences are. I mean, in particular, this. I mean, if C is true, then it means that getting rid of drug patents will not really do anything, because if they don't let you patent the drug, then you can just be like, okay, that's fine, because I'll just patent the process instead. Like it gives you a workaround. I mean, so in other words, you'll actually still be able to sell at the high premium price. Like if this is a thing, then this effect won't even happen in those places, because it's the loophole in the law is what this is saying. So this will basically allow you to avoid the consequences of having the patent removed, because you can just get another patent. So C will tell you that the plan won't do really anything, but it won't be detrimental to access either. I mean, this is some countries, because now we got to think about overall improvement of access, because in these countries nothing will happen. But in the other countries where this is not, it's only some countries, so in other places, then this will still presumably work the way we've said. So this doesn't weaken the argument. You can still improve access. I mean, you won't be improving access by as much, but is it still true that overall access worldwide will be improved? Yeah, it's still true. Because the outcome will either be status quo or it'll be better. So that'll be what. From the point of view of the competitor, if you want to elaborate on that, that would be helpful. Choice D. I mean, when you see only if, you should read this as, if this is not true, then this will not happen. Like, you can get a driver's license only if you are over 16. That means if you are not over 16, you cannot get one. This statement means that if you don't have a patent that lets you make money, then you can't even make the drug in the first place. Like you can't, the next round of drugs will come to a halt. Like nobody will develop them. So if you make that, if you condense that even further, you get, without a patent system, no one will continue to develop drugs. Well, that is definitely going to destroy this, because that will reduce future access to zero for those drugs, because they won't exist. That's the answer we want. And again, notice that it's very clear that this is the answer. It's the only answer that even shows that access will decrease. And in fact, it'll decrease all the way to 0 for the drugs that will no longer be developed. Choice E says, no one picked it, but choice E just says that you cannot buy the drugs from a no patent country and mail them into a patent country. If you could do that, that would allow you, presumably with some sort of taxes added on and maybe some shipping costs, but that would allow you to buy at those prices and then import them into the other country. So, like if you were in the U.S., you could buy some drugs from China that were cheaper and have them shipped. But if they don't let you, then that will actually strengthen this argument, because it'll keep the market working the way that the market works. Like it'll show you that people cannot avoid market forces. No one picked this choice anyway, so. All right, let's put questions on the board here. When CR problems. Anthony, not really, because the task is so different. I mean, there's nothing that you would ever do with an RC passage that you would also do with a CR argument. I mean, because there's main idea questions which have no equivalent whatsoever on these problems. I mean, there's never going to be a critical reasoning problem that's just like, la la la, summarize. Because there would be no challenge there. I mean, it's not very hard to summarize something that has 5 lines to begin with. So that would be an irrelevant skill set. But then the other thing that you do with RC is you have to like find a chunk of details somewhere and then like recycle the same facts. Those are the detail questions. Still not really relevant, because 90% of the challenge there is to find a small amount of relevant text in a very large passage. So here, there's no very large passage to swim through and mentally index. So no, those are very different skill sets. And I mean, the flip side, look at what you're doing here. You have to actually respond to this argument in a way that makes it look bad. You don't ever do that in RC. Like, you don't bring in outside criticism and try to shoot down someone's case. So RC and CR, for all practical purposes, completely independent skill sets. Yeah, I mean, this is a thing. I mean, anything that you do to make this more personally relevant is going to be a win. Like this other thing, I think I'm just really loving everything this person says today. This is also good, because when you do this, you are making this come alive. And as I know I say this way too many times, but like 99% of this is, can you make this come alive? Can you make this not black letters on a white screen? And thinking thoughts like this, that's what wins the game. Competitor can't. Yeah, Pete, that's what we said about choice C. So what you have in choice C is in the countries. That's exactly what happens in these countries. In other words, there will be no change in access. But then in other countries, there will still be an increase in access. So future access can be improved. Overall, that will still be true. Like all C does is show you that there will be some places in the world where access might still be the same, but it doesn't weaken this statement. And then, I mean, look at D. I mean, D actually shows you that there will be future drugs that would have existed that now will not exist and will therefore have zero access. That's a pretty clear winner. So when you review the problem, you definitely want to reach a point where you're like, oh yes, definitely D, and oh no, definitely not C. All right. Okay. Looks like we're done. Time flies when you're having a good time. Thanks. I think we'll do some more of these, unless someone submits a topic that is just astoundingly awesome. Then we can do that. But I got a few more of these lined up to do. If you've got a very specific thing in sentence correction that you want to submit, you can submit it on the submission form. Some actual topic. But remember, if it is one or two questions, then the forum is probably the place to take that. Yeah, this is D. All right, I'm going to kill the recording here.